Greetings, pen pals. We have the Pilot Kaküno today. This is an inexpensive pen from Pilot from Japan. This is a kid's student grade pen. Not to say that it doesn't have its general uses. As we'll see, it's a pretty nice pen, but it's really designed from a marketing and product line perspective as being their sort of first fountain pen for kids. It's definitely a student level, kids oriented, entry level pen. And we shall see that as we get to it. It comes in this retail packaging, which is pretty nice. It basically has the pen and the cap. That's basically all that's here. And then you have a little instruction booklet, and that's pretty much it. It is a pretty nice, it's inexpensively packaged, and here's what you get. Does not come with a converter or anything like that. It's a cartridge converter pen from Pilot. In terms of size, we're talking about still a pretty small pen. Here it is compared to a Lamy Safari and a Pilot Metropolitan. As you can see, we're talking about a pen that is a bit shorter than these guys. So we're talking about a pen that's on the small-ish side, not tiny, but small-ish. It is clipless, as you see. It has a slip-off cap that snaps on. It's all plastic. The cap has this interesting little sort of curvy taper to it. That just gives it kind of a nice, distinctive little look. It says Pilot Kaküno on the cap. Pilot's in the normal Pilot logo and font, and Kaküno is in this sort of handwriting style with an umlaut over the U. The cap is otherwise just a solid plastic cap. There is a liner inside the cap that does keep the nib from drying out. And both the cap and the end of the barrel have holes on the end. 2 on the end of the barrel, 3 on the end of the cap. And there is a tiny little nub to serve as a roll stop on the end of the cap there, and it does work. So that definitely is effective in stopping it from rolling. It is a 6-sided cap, so it's not round, and the pen is 6-sided as well. So there you go. There's nothing to enforce them lining up. So in other words, there's no these move around freely. So if you want to have the 6 sides lined up, you actually have to do it yourself. There's nothing in there to sort of enforce that. It's actually decently long, unposted. It's a very light pen. It weighs only 13 grams, so there's really not a lot of reason not to post it. It's good length posted. It posts quite solidly, etc. So it's pretty comfortable there. The section is a nice long section. It does have the facets on the section, so it is going to, like a lot of these student grade pens, it is going to enforce that sort of tripod grip, much like, say, a Lamy Safari or something like that. So you do have that to, if that's an issue for you. Otherwise, it's a nice plastic section that's pretty long with a tiny little bit of flare on the end. It's a steel nib, a steel Pilot nib. This one is in medium. It's got an M for medium, and instead of like any kind of Pilot logo, it's got like a nice little smile etched on the nib, again enforcing the fact that this is a kid's student style pen. And of course, it has an uninspiring plastic feed. Now, like I said, it is a cartridge converter pen, and cartridge converter pens from Pilot are generally bad news. Now, I put a CON-40 in here. It doesn't normally come with a converter. We'll get to that in a minute. So this is the CON-40. This is the normal sort of run-of-the-mill Pilot converter that most Pilot pens use these days. It's a very bad converter. It doesn't hold a lot of ink. We're going to talk about how to get as much ink as you possibly can into this converter in a few minutes. But one thing I will point out, unlike a lot of Pilot pens, I mean, there are some very, very expensive Pilot pens that what I'm about to say doesn't hold true of. But fortunately for the Kaküno, it will take the CON-40. The CON-40 is the big converter from Pilot, and it's the one converter from Pilot that I think actually works well. And interestingly enough, it fits just fine in this Pilot Kaküno. So the good news is you can use a CON-40 if you have one or you're inclined to purchase one for this pen. It obviously will take Pilot cartridges as well. But like I said, I'm going to be, for the purposes of this video, we're going to be using this CON-40, and I'm going to show you how to actually get as full a fill as possible with that CON-40 as one possibly could. All right, so we compared it with a Pilot Metropolitan and a Lamy Safari. Can we compare it to some other Pilot pens? Oh yes, we can. Okay, here it is compared to some other sort of plasticky, somewhat lower end Pilot pens. So here's our Kaküno. Here it is compared to a 78G, which is a pretty small pen, and as you can see, it's a tiny bit smaller than that. Here it is compared to the Pilot Explorer, which is a decently sized all plastic pen from Pilot. It's a bit smaller than that. It is bigger than the Pilot Prera, which is quite a small pen from Pilot. Almost pocket, but not quite, I'd say pocket size. And it is about the same size as the Pilot Lucina. Let's compare it now to some sort of higher end Pilot pens. Okay, here is our Kaküno. Here it is compared to a Pilot Custom Heritage 912. As you can see, it's quite a bit smaller than that. Very much smaller than a Pilot Custom 823, and also even smaller than a Pilot Falcon, which is not really a particularly huge pen. In case you're interested as to how it compares to a Pilot Custom Urushi, I shall indulge you, and yes, here it is. It is quite a bit smaller than the Custom Urushi, in case that's a comparison you were wondering about. Okay, we're going to demonstrate a little technique now for how to get the most that you could possibly get in terms of a fill on a Pilot CON-40 converter. So let's just see what happens if we just try to fill it the normal way. So we dip our converter in our ink. This is obviously not regular ink. This is just water with a drop of ink in it for demonstration purposes. And then we're going to draw ink in and out and in and out. We'll do that a whole bunch of times, but you will see that you will not get more than, on a good day, even if you do it quite slowly, drawing the ink up, you're not going to get more than about a half a fill on that converter. So as you can see here, there's not a lot of ink in there. We'll just tap it down to get so you can see, but there's not a lot of ink in there. There's only about halfway. Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to start out with the piston all the way as close to the nib as it can be, and then you're going to dunk it in, and then we're going to draw up our ink 2 or 3 times, going all the way down and all the way up and all the way down and all the way up to get the feed really well saturated. On our last iteration, we're going to go all the way down and then only halfway up. We're then going to pull it out, and then we're going to point the nib straight up, and then what we want to do is slowly draw the piston down away from the nib, and do this kind of slowly. And what we're doing is we're pulling the ink that's in the feed into the bottom of the converter. So now what we have here is the lower part of the converter filled with ink, and then we have air in the upper part here. What we're then going to do now is turn it back up slowly, and we're going to do it until we just start to see ink coming up through the feed. What that's telling us is that we've expelled all the air from the upper portion of the feed and converter, and we're not dealing with air there anymore. So now I'm just starting to see ink come up there. I'm going to stop, I'm going to dunk it in, and then I'm going to turn it clockwise again to draw in as much ink as I possibly can. And if I take this out, I can see that I've got practically a full fill on this CON-40 converter. So there you go. That's how you can get a nearly full fill. That's all the rigmarole you got to go through just to get a full fill on this CON-40 converter, but it is doable. That is for sure. So let's try it with some actual ink now, and then we'll do some writing, and we'll see how that goes from there. We're going to use just plain old-fashioned Pilot Blue for the purposes of this video. All right, so like we said, we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to turn it so our piston is all the way up towards the nib. We're going to dunk it in, and then we're going to turn it clockwise, draw up ink, up and down 2 or 3 times to get our feed really, really well saturated with ink. And then, as we said before, on our final go around, we're only going to pull it up about halfway. We're then going to turn it vertically, and then what we're going to do is we're going to draw the ink down from the feed into the bottom of the converter. And then we're going to now turn it back clockwise and to expel the air and we see air bubbles coming out, which is a good thing. And when we get the air bubbles stop and we just have sort of ink coming out, then we know we're all the way there. Then we can turn it back and then turn it clockwise again and then fill it the rest of the way. And there we go. Pretty good. That is as good a fill as you're ever going to see on a CON-40. So there you go. Let's just wipe this off, clean it up, put it back in the pen, and let's do a writing sample. All right, folks, what we're writing with here today is a Pilot Kaküno. And this has a steel nib in medium. Now, this is actually very fine for a medium. So I would say if this was a German nib, this would be an extra fine. And a normal Japanese nib, I'd even say this is a fine. So this is very, very fine for a medium. But it is quite smooth. I'd say it's about average wetness, which is good. And it writes really, really, really well. In terms of reverse writing, no. That's like crazy scratchy. Don't want to do it. So do not do reverse writing with this. But it normal way writes quite well, quite nice, quite smooth. It is just very, very, very fine for a medium nib. But there you go. And we have some, flows well, etc. Nice writer. Very, very good. Speaking of very good, one thing that would really be very good is if you all could please like, comment, share, and subscribe. That would be very much appreciated by me. Well, that's about it for this pen, this Pilot Kaküno. Like I said, a very, very nice student grade pen, but you don't have to be a student to use it or enjoy it. Let's talk about this ink now for a minute, shall we? All right, this ink is Pilot Blue. It's a standard blue. It's a tiny bit on the light side, and it does have a little bit of red sheen that on certain papers will pop out. Here it is compared to, say, Monteverde Horizon Blue. So it's a bit less saturated than the Monteverde Horizon Blue. Here it is compared to J. Herbin Éclat de Saphir. Very, very similar to that ink as well, but again, just a tiny bit less saturated. Monteverde Sapphire, again, slightly different shade of blue, but again, in the same family. And here it is compared to its cousin from Iroshizuku, Asa Gao. Asa Gao has a lot more of that red sheen, but the underlying blue color is very, very similar. as well. So that's our Pilot Blue on the color cards. So like we said, this is Pilot Blue. Now, in terms of standard blue inks, this is one that I actually like quite a bit. Personally, I think in a nib this fine, you might want a slightly darker ink, but it really depends on your sort of use case and you know, your personal taste, etc. But I just think this is a really nice looking blue. It's one of my favorites in terms of standard basic blues. My absolute favorite in this category is probably Ackerman Delft's Blau. I have a video that has that ink in it, so you can check that out if you like. But this is up there as well in terms of basic blue inks. You know, sort of a non-fancy, non-feature-rich blue, so to speak. That's what this looks like on this Rhodia paper. Let's take a quick look at what it looks like on Tomoe River paper, shall we? Okay, what we're writing with here is Pilot Blue. And this is on Tomoe River paper. So you get a bit of variation here. Under certain circumstances, you do get a little bit of a red sheen that sort of pops out here and there with this ink. So this is, like I said, a very, very nice ink. I really like it quite a bit. And again, nice sort of basic blue. All right, I think that will just about do it for this video. I certainly hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly enjoyed making it. And as always, until we see each other again, have a great day. Bye-bye.